Welcome to the flowerschool.com video library. I'm Leanne Kessler, Director of the Floral Design Institute, and today I'm here to share with you the popular garden-style bridal bouquet. In the new garden style, materials are so diverse. Yes, the popular things like the hydrangea and the garden roses, they're still here. But interesting materials, things that would be reminiscent of what might be in a garden, even if it's a fantasy garden, like the kale or eryngium. Fragrant blossoms like the hyacinth. And again, very interesting textural things like protea. And then back to traditional romance, the lisianthus and stock, also so fragrant, tulips, and foliage, gilded white and sparkling like a little bit of silver. Dusty Miller is naturally frosted with that fuzzy white, so it's beautiful. Occasionally it'll come in a little grayer, slightly damaged. If you dust it with the glossy white from Design Master, it will look good as new. Now other foliages that maybe aren't naturally in that white family can be enhanced as well. This eucalyptus came in green, kind of a silvery green, but I wanted it to be a little more sparkly. So again, dusted it with the white. You can do the same thing on seeded eucalyptus. So many foliages look great with just a touch of white. Don't plaster it. It doesn't need to be solid, but just a blushing, a sparkling, a frosting, whatever you want to call it. You can use the same technique for other blossoms. Here I've blushed the baby's breath with the Just for Flowers pink. So it gives me a softer look rather than the harsh white, so everything will blend together so well. One problem that you can encounter in creating these larger style bouquets with such interesting items is that their stems are so large that if you do too many of these in a bouquet, pretty soon the handle's going to be so big that the little girl can't even get her hands around it. Very awkward, not attractive. So the technique to use for that is to cut the stem off, especially on your sturdy items like the protea and the kale. You don't need to worry about them getting into the water source. They're going to hold so well. And then using an 18 gauge wire, just kind of go through some of the lateral leaves and then bend it down. If you feel uncomfortable, you could do 2 wires, although oftentimes 1 is enough. Then once it is wired, go back with your corsage tape and cover over, creating an artificial stem on this blossom. It's going to be much smaller, take up less space, be able to hide in with the natural stem so they'll never even know. And it also gives you control because now that it's wired, you can move it wherever you want to. And I would do the same thing on the kale. It too is very, very long lasting with a large stem. So cut that off. Pull off some of the side leaves that you don't need. Again, just putting it through and hooking over one of the laterals. 1 wire is enough. Tape it. So as you're working, look at all your materials. Things that are sturdy, that don't absolutely have to have water, go ahead and cut them off. Wire them, tape them, so you have a smaller stem to work with and also control. So I'm doing that with the kale, with the protea, and then I also did it with the brunia berries, did that ahead of time. So again, it's just a very narrow stem to tuck into the bouquet. The base of the bouquet is this absolutely fabulous hydrangea. 1 large stem, and that's stunning. And then I use that as an armature to start feeding into. Roses can tuck right in, maybe putting a couple of them, bringing in some of the stock, and again, just kind of weaving it through, finding a spot that it fits in. A couple of those. Maybe all 3 of them together, clustering varieties so they get their maximum value. Pulling this one back up a little bit so he doesn't get lost in there. And tucking. Not worrying too much about precision because things will continue to shift. Then adding in the kale. You can see the wire just goes in so easily, tucking it down into the hydrangea. And the protea Maybe bringing it over towards the back. So it gives it a full round look. And then thinking about the tulips, weaving them in. Maybe protecting them just a bit by adding another rose on that side, because their stems are a little bit softer than the others. And that will guide everything, holding it into place. Maybe tucking in some of the silver, brightening it right there. A little bit of brunia berry and another one. You can see it's very easy to feed things in, and this handle is not getting too big because I've got things wired. As you work, continue to tuck blooms in, looking for little holes where you might need an extra flower. The lisianthus tucked into the center. You have such wonderful little stems, it's easy to get them in there. Maybe do one of the darker ones as well. They just drop into place. And then coming over into this side, there's a little bit of a hole, bringing in some of the lisianthus. Maybe even letting the bud come out a little bit longer there. And then looking around where else I might need to add a blossom. Maybe bringing in another rose. And a little bit more of the silver. And then just checking for balance throughout to make sure everything's tucked in right where you want it to be and looks beautiful no matter which side you look. At the last, I add the bit of the foliage, Dusty Miller, tucking it in, maybe a little bit of the baby's breath, deciding where I might want that soft fluffiness. Don't want it everywhere. I want it to be a little accent. Maybe some seeded eucalyptus. Give me a little bit of drape. Tiny bit more of the Dusty Miller tucked in. And then going back to the gilded eucalyptus, letting it be softer, draping. Loosens up the bouquet, letting it have that little bit of movement. And a touch more baby's breath back on this side. Maybe a little bit more seeded eucalyptus over here. And then when you're happy with everything, using a bit of bind wire to lash it off, tucking it right underneath your finger, then holding it upside down and lashing around 2 to 3 times, making sure it's secure. And then just twisting the 2 ends together to hold it into place. To finish off the handle, I cut the stems down, but not as short as they're actually going to be when I'm done. That way I can store it in a flower cooler, keep it in water, and then as I go to deliver, cut it down the last time. But for now, just getting it short enough that I can set it down into the vase, which has no water in it at the moment, but setting it in so that I can prepare the cover for the handle. And with this natural style, doing something a little more old-fashioned, the tulle as opposed to regular ribbon, pulling off a segment. Then holding it, leaving a long end, and wrapping right over the top of the bind wire. I'm not going to go all the way down, just bringing it up around the neck to give a more polished finish. And then as I get good coverage, setting it back in the vase. And then taking the 2 ends and just tying them in a knot. And again, make sure it can't come undone. And then making just a bow, like you're tying your shoe, a little more casual than a florist bow. Letting it look more old-fashioned, like they went out and gathered these blossoms in their garden. And then just cut it down. You've got a beautiful bouquet ready to be carried at the altar. Another technique you can use to help keep the handle from getting too large is just to glue blossoms in. So after the bouquet is done, go back, gather something. Maybe you want to use the tip of the hyacinth, pull off a few of the lower blooms, and then using your Oasis Flow adhesive, the cold glue, just a bit of glue on the stem, and set it aside so it gets a little tacky. Going back, some of the orangium, clustering them, and then again, a little bit of glue on their stems. Blowing on it to dry it. It will bond better if you let it get tacky before you try to put it in. And then just tucking it right down in, adding even a little more texture, a little more color. Bring it in and over here. And then repeating it wherever you want, just a touch more color and fragrance from the hyacinth. The romantic garden-style bouquet has been popular for a long time now, but the contemporary version has much more interesting materials, unique touches, and they're getting bigger. So for you as a professional, you need to know how to keep it looking professional, keeping the handle small. Things to think about: remember to wire and tape, remember to glue, remember to clean off all your stems so it's nice and tidy. Remember to shorten it just a bit when you deliver. Length is generally 2 hands, so cutting it off right about there. Now for more creative inspiration, or if you have questions, you can find it on our website at flowerschool.com. If you can't find it there, pick up the telephone and give us a call. Phone number is 503-223-8089. And now that the wedding season will be upon us shortly, I'd love to see what you create. Take a photograph and send it off to me. You can use my personal email. It's Leanne, Leanne, at floraldesigninstitute.com. Now it's your turn. Have fun and do something you love.